Hi, I'm Mimi Chan. Welcome to Culture Chat. Thanks for joining the conversation. Hi, everyone. My week is incomplete without my conversation with the one and only Greg Rucka. I'd like to take a moment to express my sincere gratitude to Greg for sharing this journey with me during such a tumultuous time. It has been the bright spot in some rather tough weeks. I'd like to also thank everybody who has been listening and for those of you who have been a part of this conversation. We've had some great listener questions. Please keep them coming. Today, Greg and I talk about what brings us comfort during these times, how the characters in his head takes form, and answer listener questions about Queen and Country and The Punisher. For those that don't already know, Greg Rucka is a New York Times best-selling author of hundreds of comics and nearly 24 novels. He has written for film, television, and video games. His career has included critically acclaimed and Eisner-winning work in both the creator-owned and work-for-hire arenas. As always, please listen with an open mind and remember that my opinion on politics are my own and do not affect my position at work. I am loving these conversations and hope you are too. If you are, please rate my podcast on your platform of choice. You can also share the podcast with someone you know, and I'd really love it if you would rate it. If you'd like to support with a donation, you can become a patron of the show by visiting my website or patreon.com. I'd like to give a huge shout out to my most recent patron, James Egan. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Hello, everybody, and mostly hello to you, Greg. Apparently, this has become the Greg Rucka Masterclass.
Oh, really? Okay. We should charge.
Yes.
No, that implies that there's worth in what I have to say. So I'm not sure about that either.
Oh, I don't know about that. Our listeners have been writing in, and I've seen posts on your Instagram as well on how much value they're getting from these conversations. So I am, first of all, thank you, listeners. I'm glad someone's listening.
Yeah, it's nice to know. And hopefully people aren't unsubscribing from the podcast. So Geek in the City Radio was talking about trying to get you on with them and doing like a whole conversation.
And we should. Absolutely.
I think you should as well. They're lovely people, and I think you would have a blast.
Yes. I'm always happy to have good conversations because it's surprising how far and few in between they can be. I mean, now I have a weekly one, so that's great. But it's always an honor. So I thought today we do have a couple listener questions that we can get to later, and we'll get to them. But I thought we would do, some kind of joyful things. I think it's been such a crazy time for everybody, and last week my Mike Mignola episode dropped, and he was pretty up, and people really responded to that, and I thought, oh, okay, well, let's see where we can go with that, because you and I tend to go a little dark, but I like that too. So
well, I was going to say, it was like, really, what, there are things to be up about?
I know. I think it's more like let's recall the things we were joyful about. So for me, one of the things that has been interesting that I've noticed amongst a lot of our social conversations, reactions is kind of like, what's comforting you these days, or what's your go-to? And this week I had posted that I just needed a moment, and so of course I watched The Princess Bride because that comforts me, and then I watched it with a snack that comforts me, and so for me, food is usually a big go-to, but that could get dangerous really fast.
Yes, it can.
Yeah. So I was curious. I know things are crazy, but there are a lot of positive things happening in your life. But I was wondering what what things kind of comfort you.
Oh, God. I am bad at this. Brian Bendis's lovely bride, Elisa, texted me last night. Because she had seen, I presume, that the trailer drop was coming for The Old Guard. And she had texted me. And, if you know Elisa, she is a lovely human being. I mean, she's just, and she's buoyant, and she is effervescent, honestly applies to her. I mean, and she is really housed of an optimism both she and Brian are actually, and I think it comes from them both never having taken their good fortune for granted, right? But she had sent me this text saying, "Yay!" and I hope you're enjoying it. And I was like, I'm trying, but I don't. And it's the thing that Brian has said, and it's actually a thing that Matt said, right? Because when we talked about it when Matt was on, that moment of going, oh, you're going to have to, you're in the moment now, you got to enjoy it. And the problem with being in the moment is that you're never looking at the moment, you're looking at the next moment. So what do I do to comfort myself? You mean like aside from sleeping and, petting the dog?
Oh, petting. Okay, Marlo is very comforting.
Yeah, and she recently got shorn, so
Yes.
she's now super velvety, which makes her super duper soft. And it also makes her a little cold because the weather turned cold again here.
So you were right.
So she comes up and cuddles. Oh, yeah, no.
Matt was optimistic.
Matt was whistling in the dark. He knew better, too. He needed to believe it. But no, Portland did what it needs to do. It did fake summer back to spring, and it's raining again, and it's been raining for the last week, and it's been a little cold. What do I do? This is going to be a big giveaway. I actually think the biggest thing that's given me comfort in the last 2 weeks is I am in a play-by-post role-playing game.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm actually in a couple, and they're all with the same people, which is funny. Like we have like 3 games, all with the same 4 players.
Interesting.
And they're all running concurrently. But until about a week and a half ago, we only had 2 games, and I had mentioned to one of my friends who was playing in this that I had run way back in the day, once upon a time. A Gotham Central RPG for couple of dear friends and for Jen. And it was half a writer's exercise because it was while I was sort of working on the book. So it was a way to sort of flesh out characters that I wasn't writing by sort of saying, create your characters and play with them. So there are actually characters in the Gotham Central first shift that are based on role-playing game characters created by friends.
Okay.
And I had mentioned this.
That sounds cool.
I had mentioned this in passing to this other friend, and he, like all of us, we're all doing fine with an asterisk right now. And he had said, "Oh my God, I would be all over that." So I was like, well, maybe I'll try it as a play-by-post because I haven't run anything in years. Like the last game I ran was for Jen and Matt and Kelly Sue. And Matt Clark, I think, was like the last time I tried to run anything. And there just hasn't been time. So I decided, okay, yeah, I'll try this. And I actually have found it very comforting and incredibly distracting because it's like, well, I don't want to work on this thing, but I can work on this.
So I'm total novice here. So how does that actually work? You're saying play by post. So basically this is done all obviously through the computer, and then you set up the game, and then...
Yeah, it's all verbal. It's not live. Like there are websites like Roll20 where you can literally have a virtual tabletop and have live video and see everybody you're playing with. And you see stuff like this on the various, now that gaming has gone so mainstream.
Yeah.
You can find it all over Twitch, and you can find it all over YouTube, and then shows like Critical Role and so on. But this is using a specific Discord server that we created. And, I am narrating for them, and then they come in and make their posts and interact, and I tell them what's going on. And it becomes, in that format, it's an interesting writer's exercise as well, because it takes a lot of the pressure off of needing to sit and like, this has to be good, because it doesn't have to be good. You want it to be good. Right, you want to write something that your other participants are going to enjoy reading, but you don't have to sit there and be like, I got to get, this is going to be published.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Right. So it's almost like flexing your muscles a little bit without the stress of.
Well, and all gaming is, well, I shouldn't say all gaming. The merit I find in role playing games is that they're collaborative storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
So it is an exercise that, you know, there's a writer's shorthand when you're talking ideas with other writers and so on. The worst thing you can say is no. Right, you don't shut it down, but the yes and is much more productive. And the nature of a game is almost always that it's yes and.
I see.
You know, somebody puts something out, and somebody else, you know, you can ignore it, but if you do that, you're a bad player. So, you know, it becomes, you have to take it, you have to say yes, and you add to it, and it propels. And so that has actually been very comforting the last 10 days. I would say there's certain video games that give me comfort, and there are, but I actually find that what I use them for is really to turn myself off.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we've discovered this is a problem throughout our family, is that everybody in this family can't shut their head off. And so we all have a variety of techniques we use to do that, most of them harmful to one degree or another. And my God, I just realized that's going to sound like, you know, everybody in the house is shooting heroin. That's not actually what's going on here. But, you know, for instance, Jen is the type of person who will get into bed at night and will be sleepy and will start to fall asleep and then start thinking and just spinning herself up. And Dashiell does it, and Elliot does it, and I do it. And in particular, when I think you live with stories, I can only speak for myself in this, but when you're living with stories and the stories are ongoing, they're always ticking away at the back of your mind. You're always trying to solve the problem on, if not a conscious level, certainly on a subconscious one. And as a result, it becomes very difficult to sort of clear your head. I'm not good at just sitting still and listening to music, right? Like that has to be a very active choice. And if I'm listening to music, I am almost always doing something else, right? So what I find with a lot of video games are that they command my focus in a way that I can get my back brain to shut up. So, you know, I adore the game Red Dead Redemption 2. I think it is a masterpiece. And I've been playing a game that was introduced to me by another friend of mine, also in Australia, called Cultist Simulator.
Okay.
It is this weird sort of virtual-esque card game. And it's got the right creepy to it. And it's very elegantly designed, and it doesn't give you any information whatsoever when you start. Quite literally, it says, not going to tell you a thing. Knock yourselves out.
Now, I think I find that all interesting because I have so many students that are hooked on video games and RPGs. And back in the day, Oscar and I used to video game quite a bit. I've never played RPGs ever. But if someone had explained it to me in the way that you just did, I may have been more interested. Because what I hear is, yeah, I was playing my RPG game and I almost burnt my house down because the stove was on and I got caught up in my game. And so I always saw it as, oh my gosh, this seems very addictive and very dangerous. So I always kind of tended to steer away. But I love the writing exercise and the creativity and, you know, the interaction with your friends.
I have a piece of news for you that just came in. This is going to digress. Hang on.
That's okay. Hot off the press.
Yeah, because this won't go out for another week, so it will.
Yes,
it will come up. I just got a text from the guy who I'm now texting with. His name is Dave Bernard, and he's the non-writing executive producer on Stumptown. And he has just informed me that we have just been picked up for a second season. And the official announcement will be at 1:00 today. And then he said, ABC has asked nobody to say anything on social media until then. It's like, well, duh. What am I going to say? So, for you, young lady, that means once we get off this, you can't.
Of course. I'm not going to go over and
yeah,
me, I'm such a social media advocate. I just want to share everything.
Yeah. You clearly are not to be trusted in.
Congratulations though. Let's do an exercise for Greg here, and let's take a moment in the present to really, really be feel the congratulations, be grateful and happy, and accept that you've done some really amazing things, and your creativity is now being shared through this medium that so many people are obviously enjoying. And I think we should all be applauding that. I think this is really great.
And you say that, and what I want to say is, yeah, it's wonderful, but I'm not really working on the show. I'm a consulting producer. I mean, I'm more than happy. I'm not looking this gift horse in any part of its anatomy, but I'm much more happy for Kobe and Cameron and Tantu and Cole and Jake and Michael. I want to see. This is what excites me about it. We're going to have a better season than the first one. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because there were problems in the first one. Okay. And those problems became more and more evident as the season went on.
Can you expand on that?
You know what? Let's come back to that at a later point.
Okay, no problem.
Because I don't want to totally get derailed, but it's a good conversation to have in another couple weeks.
Okay. Which we will hopefully be talking again in another couple weeks. So I'm going to write this down. Yeah. So I definitely want to get into that. But I think kind of going on our joyous moments and you and I have a lot in common, which is probably why we continue to talk every Thursday. Not only are our audiences just demanding it, but obviously, that goes without saying.
Let's be honest. We're doing this because we enjoy it.
Of course.
And the benefit is that this
is part of my comfort.
Put it out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So listeners, apologies. You're the secondary to this, but it's funny because as teachers, do as I say, not as I do, because I'm telling you this because I don't do it at all. Like when I was making my film and I was going to film festivals, which for listeners that don't know the indie film world, getting into a film festival is already this huge, you should be just celebrating because it's really, really difficult. Like thousands of films and you get chosen, you should be happy. I was happy for my first acceptance because, it's that first one.
Yeah, you did it.
I did it, and I was happy. After I kept getting accepted, that was fine. I was like, okay, good, but I didn't get accepted into this one. So there's where I went. And then at every film festival, we won an award, and that apparently is even more of a big deal. This is my first film, and I would be on the way home. Obviously, I'd be happy in the moment. I'd be on the way home in the car, and I would be thinking about the next thing coming up and how I'm frustrated because of XYZ, or, I'm still bummed that, Hawaii didn't pick us up. And Oscar would just turn to me and go, can you just enjoy the moment? We just left where you won the big award for the whole festival or whatever the case may be. And you can't just have one night of, I'm really happy, I'm so proud of myself, move on. And 8 years later, I'm kind of in that space where I'm telling people about the film. I'm really proud of it. I'm trying to share it more because now more than ever, I really feel like an immigrant story is relevant and important for people to listen to and understand how much contribution to society, but also that they're not all like murderers and rapists or whatever it is that, our, who is always saying. So, but it's taken 8 years and I can look back, but that's also because it was in the past, right? But in the present, I feel why you have the struggle, which is why it's important to have people around you to remind you, like, Greg, great job. Just be happy for a few moments.
My manager once said to me, and I adore her. Her name is Angela Chang Kaplan, and she's been representing me in Holly weirdness for really about 2 decades now. So like finally her investment is starting to pay off. But about 10 years ago, she and I had a long conversation, and one of the things that came up in the conversation was that see, I mean, it's two different things, right? I absolutely recognize the moment, right? Like all humility aside, I am not so, up my own ass that I can't recognize,
Right.
dude, there's a movie coming out and there's a TV show and there's all this stuff. And these are all things that I've been working for a really long time. And they're wonderful. And that hopefully they will lead to being able to do more good work, because that's at the end of the day, sort of the drive is I want it. It's all well and good that there be a movie, right? Mm-hmm. But the goal is not to make a movie. The goal is to make a good movie, right? Mm-hmm. So on the one side of it is this moment, where you're going, yes, I can see it. I really can see it. But on the other is this, and I don't know if this is universal, but I think this is the case for many people who are working at a craft that has no terminus, right? Mm-hmm. Meaning that you talk about your dad, right? Mm-hmm. And it is clear that he is a man who is, even at his age, still learning.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? That to become a Sifu is not to go, and now I'm a Sifu.
Exactly.
And that's it.
Yeah, the Kung Fu journey is forever.
Right. And becoming a Sifu is in many ways going, wow,
now I begin.
know nothing. Yeah. Right? And so it's all well and good, to reach these goals. And this isn't, I don't think, bad. I really mean this. I don't think it's a negative. It's all well and good to have achieved the thing, but it has to always be about, okay, so what's next? Mm-hmm. Where do we take this and how do we go? I have said for years and years that the death of any writer, and I think you can extend this to certainly any artist in whatever the field, is the moment that they think they've figured it out, they're done. Mm-hmm. Right? The moment they're like, oh yeah, my somewhat dark humor take on it is to say, when Hemingway started his career, it took him 2 to 4 weeks to write a short story, and at the end of his career, apocryphally, he was writing a short story in an afternoon. And I used to say, and that's part of why he ate a gun, that if you reach the point where you're done, where you know it, then why get out of bed? Now that's a different thing, right? Than being in a profession that really does say there is a container of knowledge, and once you have mastery of it, you've mastered it. Mm-hmm. But I think most people, and we can call it ambition, or we can call it human nature, or whatever. I think our desire is to keep going, to do the next thing. So yeah, I mean, make of that what you will.
Well,
that is. I like the part where we were talking about the merit of role-playing games more.
I know that you do, because this is about you, and I know how you are, because I'm so similar. But I obviously, our listeners and myself knows that you are unbelievably self-aware and humble and everything, and I'm just reminding you to be okay, to enjoy it, and to kind of let go and have a little more of the moment than you allow yourself to. And of course, we have to look to the next thing and propel forward and keep growing. And you're going to do that anyway. You're not in any danger of thinking that you've made it so much that now the pen has been put up and that you are now on the throne of I'm the greatest thing ever. You're so far from that. So
thank you.
I want you to just enjoy, because I know I struggle with it. And I know that people who tend to be very humble also struggle, and that's like the kung fu thing. So kind of touching on what you said earlier, we have people that come into the school all the time and like, well, when do I finish? Right? Oh, well, when do you finish? I was like, well, I mean, never.
10, 15 minutes after you're dead.
Yeah.
Why?
So I asked, like, well, when do you finish learning? How can you put a measure on that? Have you ever played guitar or a piano? And you can get to a level of mastery for sure in your art form or your physicality, but there's always more to learn. And you can tell which students will stay and stick with it because they're the ones that look really excited over that fact. And the ones that look like, what, I don't get a certificate and a black belt and I'm good to go, you know they're not going to stick around because they don't have that mentality of that forever open cup of like needing to be, their cup will become full at some point.
Yeah.
And
and there's also
right away.
There's also an expectation that the cup should fill.
Yes.
Right. It's like, I'm going to give you money, and in exchange for that, you're going to fill the cup. And it's like, no, that's not what's going on here. I'm going to give you the tools with which to move forward. But, and I will be there to help, and I will assist, and I will guide. But I can't say if you do this and this and this, a master you shall be.
Yes. Everyone wants to be the master, by the way. That's almost everyone's, like, it's deep in there, even the ones that don't verbalize it. But, you want to be the master. Like, it seems so cool to be a kung fu master. And I was like, it's
It does. I am not sure I would ever have had the wherewithal to commit to what is required. I don't know why it is that I committed to becoming a writer. And I think that's one of the things, it goes back to that idea of I would like my certificate of mastery, please. And for whatever reason, I understood early on that I was never going to figure this out. I would figure out some things, but I'm trying to finish a 12-page script, and it's a 12-pager, and I've been doing this for a quarter of a century, and I wrote 6 pages of it last night, and it was like, and I had to have rewritten the first 3, 3 times, and God knows what I'm going to do with these last 6. I know it's there, but it feels like if I knew less, I'd have it finished already. And the problem that I find the further I get in my career is that I've made all these mistakes, and thus in learning from them, I may have gotten better, but I've also gotten so much slower, and it's gotten so much harder. Like when you don't know anything, it's easy, right?
Right. I was going to say, isn't it because your standard has raised, right? Like the bar keeps raising, and therefore you don't want to go back to how you wrote when you were 20, for instance, because you've moved on from that.
It's not even a choice.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't do it. Mm-hmm. I genuinely, and this is not false modesty, I don't know how to do what I do any other way than the way I do it. So if somebody says to me, oh, just write something, I'm like, easy for you to say. I can't do it. I can't sit down and be like, I'm just gonna, I won't care about it. I can't. And I really resent it. It would make things so much easier if I could just shut myself up. But now we're moving into a whole different conversation as to why you get a bunch of creative types who end up, with all sorts of malfunctioning personalities, either addictions or other behaviors, because I think that there's a branch on that road that takes you to a really dark place.
Really?
It's one of the reasons why I don't write novels anymore. Novels are very difficult for me, and they are difficult to a point of being painful. They're not fun. They're not fun at all. They hurt. They and I don't mean emotionally hurt or mentally hurt. They're physically painful as well.
Right, right.
It is a toxic process for me, and until I figure out how to apply an appropriate anti-venom, I'm not going to be able to go back into it. So, and if that's, and I'm not saying that's universal. I'm just saying that for me, that's one of the reasons why I'm not going there anymore, because it's too damaging.
Yeah, I know you shared a lot of that the very first time we spoke as well. Do you think that has to do with also having the trauma of the really bad experience of the last novel?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because it's one thing to, it's one thing to apply yourself and this is universal. I mean, this, don't imagine writing, imagine painting a house, right? Or anything. If you put your heart and soul into it, and then the result is that the next day somebody comes along and hits the house with a bulldozer and does it deliberately, not accidentally, just says, you know what, we decided we didn't like your house. Or we decided that the house we told you to paint wasn't the house we wanted you to paint. So we're going to get rid of this house. Go paint another house. You might be a little pissed off if you spent 8 months out of your life doing that. And if you spent 8 months out of your life doing that in good faith that the people you were doing it for were not, in fact, going to knock over the house with a bulldozer, but would instead say, what a beautiful house, and move in, then you got sold a bill of goods. So, my relationship with Mulholland was horrible. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't because Mulholland in and of itself was horrible. It was because my first editor, I don't think was terribly good at his job, because he wasn't interested in it.
Right.
He wanted to go and be a development guy in Hollywood. So when he left, I was orphaned, and I got a new editor, and that editor didn't give a rat's ass about me. I wasn't one of his. And then when the book came out, the publisher was in a fight with Amazon. And Amazon, whether you like it or not, and I'm very firmly in not, is the primary market for all books. Mm-hmm. So if you are not able to get the book on the platform, then you're not going to move it in any reasonable volume.
Right.
And so the book sold abysmally. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't that Amazon wasn't carrying it. It's that Amazon was in a fight with the publisher, so they weren't discounting it. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's just taking money out of pocket anyway. So for the publisher to then come back and take a book that I genuinely thought was one of the best I'd ever written and say, well, that didn't work, you need to do something else. It's like, no, that wasn't on me. That wasn't on me. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You guys didn't do your part. Your part was to support the book and sell it. And you gave it no press, and you gave it no support. And there are writers, and this is another part, and this is a flaw in my personality. There are writers who, when the book is coming out, they'll jump in the car and they will drive around the country for 3 weeks going to bookstores.
Yeah.
Right. That's not me. I can't do that. Mm-hmm. I don't have a life that allows me to do that.
Right.
And so I will do everything but,
mm-hmm.
right? I will happily, promote it in any way I can. But I'm not going to go out there and hand sell my own book. Mm-hmm. I can't. I don't have the time.
Yeah. Your books are quite good, and I know a lot of people who have shared that they enjoy your novels, and so I do hope one day that path kind of reopens to you. But it is really hard when you have such a bad experience.
I figure at some point in the next couple of years, I've got 2 books in my head right now, and I know they're novels. They can't be anything but novels.
Right.
I mean, one of them maybe I could do as a graphic novel, maybe, because it would be kind of cool visually. But it is so. This is always a weird thing when a writer talks about a book that they haven't written yet. The idea for this book, the working title right now is In the Eyes, and the thing with In the Eyes is it's got to be a first-person narration, and the narrator is unreliable. And that's hard to do in a comic because a comic shows you, a comic implicitly has a certain objectivity to it. And I need the reader for this book to work. The reader has to, at a certain point, pretty early on actually, has to question the narrator's sanity and what the reality they're describing is, because it's a contemporary setting.
Right.
And then the other novel is a Kodiak novel.
Yeah.
So
I, no push or anything, but I do know that people would definitely read, and
it's always nice to know there are people who like them.
Yes.
I gotta tell you.
Yeah. But because it, like you said, it's such a traumatic experience when it was just done so badly, but that's not going to be every experience, I hope,
No.
But 2 things here. One is, I mean, it's literally pointing out the obvious, but I love listening to your analogies because they are so vivid, and they're not usually like, this. It's not usually a sentence. It's this like really great picture painting, long build up to the analogy, and so you're really feeling your house being bulldozed over and hit with a wrecking ball. I love it. It's really very fascinating for me to be able to listen and hear all your analogies. I'm hoping I'm learning to be a better storyteller because of it. And I loved. As I told you, I was rereading the Old Guards, and you had just mentioned like, oh, these things are in my head, and how you had talked about the character kind of being in your head for a while, and like all this stuff. So I would be so curious, and I understand now why you at night your head's going like because there's all these characters running around in your head, I guess. But it reminded me of when I heard about like kind of that inception for Kill Bill, where Uma Thurman's like, so there's this character, and then like 3 years later, Tarantino knocked on her door. He's like, hey, here's the script. I'm ready to go. And she was like, what? So it's just like, I love these seeds that are just constantly planted in your head, and I cannot wait for them all to kind of grow and flourish. And it's a fascinating thing because it's weird. I'm creative in a lot of ways, but I'm not normally great at, oh, I have this brand new idea, let's go here with it. Usually my husband feeds me things, or I hear or see something, and then I'm really great at execution. So once the idea is there and then you want it to go in that direction, like that's kind of my wheelhouse. So when you have these ideas in your head, do you actually write them down? Do you voice catalog? How do you catalog all these things going on? Because obviously with Andy, there's so much detail there, and you said that she was in your head for a long time from the Old Guard, and now we have this amazing film, which, by the way, we didn't talk about it on air today, I think, but please check out the trailer, share it, get excited, because it looks freaking amazing, and this is the type of film that I dream of making. Like that is the type of film I dream of making, for real. And the characters, like your characters are always so. There's so many layers. And so how do you keep track of them? All the ones floating around? And
it depends on how deep I am in an idea before I'll start writing things down about it. And again, it may be because there's an inveterate laziness to it, But there's a Stephen King quote I remember reading where he's got a collection of essays called Dance Macabre, and I believe it's in that where he talked about the fact that I never write an idea down because if it's not good enough to remember, it's not worth remembering. And it's like, well, that works for you. You know what I mean? That works for you, Stephen. Andy, Andy was actually a character sketch that I had written up in like 2011, maybe 2012. And I had a one-page bio for this concept of this sort of immortal, shorthand was Amazon. But as I started sort of playing with it, I was like, I wanted her to be really old. And then sort of foolishly decided that she was roughly about 7,000 years old, which sweetly places her right in the middle of a huge gap in the historic record. There's like nothing there, and it's like, oh crap. So when research, I think I've said this before, when we were filming the movie in England last year, I had you get like a day, if you were lucky, maybe 2 out of the week where production was shut down, and you'd have like Sunday, Monday or whatnot. And I went to the British Museum, and I was so excited. I love the British Museum. I mean, as far as, looting of other cultures go, it's a great display of imperial robbery. But part of the reason I went was like, well, I'm looking specifically for stuff that I would be able to, find, reference, and give to Leo. Because, it's all well and good to say Andy is on horseback 6,700 years ago, or whatnot. And then Leo comes back and says, did they have buckles? Like, buckles? And it's like, I have no idea if they had belt buckles. Like, you have to ask yourself certain questions.
There's so much detail.
Like the invention of the button to button a top was a huge thing in the Middle Ages, right? I mean, so you go and you look and you realize, well, the reason there's there's this huge gap is that everything from the Bronze Age got, melted down for the Copper Age. And it's like, so you literally walk through the British Museum, and the section on the historical period I'm looking at is tiny. I mean, there's literally nothing there. And I'm kind of like, that was when the penny dropped. I was like, oh, you screwed yourself nicely on that one.
Or you left yourself open for your own interpretation. But right, I know you like to be historically accurate. So
well, and it mattered. I mean, I can't have her, driving a steam-powered tank and then argue, hey, we don't know,
Yes. But I don't know if people would have been like, were there buckles around then? I don't know if they would have caught that. There would have been some people because they get a little crazy.
But it matters for Leo.
Yeah.
Well.
Okay. Yeah. The art of yes. Of course. And after talking to even like Michael Lark, your collaborator on Lazarus, you realize how much things matter. He's like, well, I have all these questions. So what about this? Or what? I learned so much from talking to all the different aspects of creation, and so that's been really fascinating for me. So this next question will kind of go right into a couple of our listener questions. So I know that on previous podcasts we've talked about the short wrap up to the Wonder Woman arc, and how you've talked about not really getting to kind of finish something. And the Old Guard originally, that was supposed to be it, the one and done. And then it kind of kept evolving into, well, we want more, we want more, we want more. But you still seem to have a very definitive end coming up. And I think it was supposed to be this month, correct? The next.
Well, issue 5, I think issue 5 of the second series will come out in July now. It was supposed to be May, but I think it's going to drop right after the movie, actually.
Oh, that makes sense.
But yeah, I did the Old Guard thinking, and that's it, we're done. And immediately Leo was like, let's do another. And I was like, okay. I mean, I can see it. Mm-hmm. And then, in thinking about it, I was like, all right. So if we do a second, we have to do a third. But if we do a third, that's it for this story.
And I know that it's a little bit far out, but I imagine that's going to be kind of a really big milestone for you, because you've described how you really don't feel like there's this nice bookend to a lot of the work that you've been privileged to work on. And I feel like this better be the case that, Lazarus is also headed in that direction. We will get our bookend, or I will be devastated, and I'll just basically call you and be like, just tell me the story then, Greg.
The only reason Lazarus would come off the rails is if Michael couldn't continue it for whatever reason, because it is one of those things that he's my co-creator on it. So if he cannot continue, it doesn't continue. It wouldn't be an issue of going, I need a new artist. It would literally be like, no, the other half of this can't do it, therefore it's not going. And the same thing would happen with Black Magic, and the same thing would happen, frankly, with the old guard.
Check. So call Michael and stay on top of him. Sure. Got it. Okay. I have written that down, and I will follow up just for my own personal gain. So, but how are you going to feel?
We're banking some things there.
Yes,
so yeah.
But how are you going to feel, with kind of not your first completed project, but, kind of one that's more personal to you, that you really feel that you got the closure you wanted?
Ask me
after.
Ask me when it's done.
Fair enough. So that leads us right into our listener questions, in which apparently you opened a can of worms with speaking about the possible endings to the things that you once wish you could have done. And so now people want to know more. So this one comes about Queen and Country, which we haven't actually really spent a lot of time talking about. So that's great. And this is from Richard. And he says, do you ever plan on returning to it? And if you were, how different of a comic would it be? Would Tara even be in it? And I imagine the role of an agency like SIS is probably fairly different nowadays.
Yeah, wow. So Richard has very deftly hit on every problem. I actually have a QNC story in mind. There would be some nodding and winking to reality. Because I would want to do it. So Private Wars ended. The last run ended. It is a good ending for Queen and Country. Like, if you've read the novel, The Last Run, that is a fine place to say we are finished and you can set it down and walk away. You could do it. There is a 10-year later version that is Tara as Diops, and would effectively thematically be about her relationship with the new Minder, probably coming in as a Minder 3, who is a young woman who is absolutely not Tara Chase. And so Tara would just be a horrible boss to this person, because she would be like, you have to do everything I did, and you have to do it better. And I had to do it all backwards and in high heels. The biggest problem right now is I don't know. And I could probably figure it out if I put the hours in. But at this moment right now, with Boris Johnson, with Brexit, with Trump, with Russia, I don't even have the first fucking clue what these intelligence services look like, because they don't know what they're doing anymore.
Right.
Because they are literally, and again, it becomes inevitable, but literally today, the news said, Trump blames his intelligence briefings on not seeing the coronavirus threat. It's like, fucker, we know for a fact they were giving you them. Just because you can't read. It is, we have never had a leader who is adamant in his, it's not my fault.
Oh yeah, the lack of accountability.
Everything that comes out of his mouth is a 3-year-old standing next to the broken vase going, I didn't do it. So, and Johnson's the same way. So I don't know I don't know how to tell that story, where you have an intelligence agency that has been so demonized and marginalized by the government it is supposed to be serving and protecting. I don't know what that story looks like. Now, I do know what a Queen and Country story looks like when those motherfuckers are gone.
So let's make some hope that this year we can look towards more Queen and Country. Wink, wink.
Yeah, I mean, I can write that story in a heartbeat because I know what happens as soon as you get somebody who's got, who isn't full of this racist, nationalistic Kool-Aid bullshit.
Yeah.
And you get and you go back to having intelligence services that, whether or not you believe in the merit of what they're doing or the way they go about doing it, believe that they are acting to serve their country. But, Le Carré pegged this, 20 years ago. He saw this, and it all goes, frankly, to the Lazarus situation, which is all of this is just, it's not about nations, it's about corporations. We don't live, our governments are false. They're really fake at this point. We are living in a proto-neo-feudalist society. This is the result of late-stage capitalism. So an intelligence service, most major intelligence services no longer work for the government. They work for the corporations that the government is now working for. And that would be, that is the thing you look at. Mm-hmm. And it becomes very interesting there. So, I've had ideas for that, and it would need to be, 12 years after the last run, and I would have to justify Chase coming back in because there's no way she would have been DOPS for a dozen years. Mm-hmm. That also allows me to have Tamsin of an age where she's a character instead of a prop.
Okay.
She was a baby when we left. Now she can be 12 or 13 and have all sorts of problems with her mom not being around. So,
yeah, they tend to get vocal around that age.
Exactly. And they have a personality and desire.
All of that. Yes. So basically, everyone, get out there and vote this year so that we can have more Queen and Country.
There you go.
If there's any motivation, then we'll take
QNC. Yes.
All right. Last question from our same listener who, little fun fact, is the one that won your Lazarus package, I believe, on Creators for Comics. Yes.
Oh.
Yes, there's a little correlation here. And so it actually, and I love these questions because it's not about anything we've actually brought up, which is your Punisher run, because he knows that was also cut short. Maybe you could talk about a couple of the ideas or stories that you might have had planned.
Well, one of the things, okay, so there had been a plan there. I was supposed to finish the run, and we were going to do, I forget all the Punisher subtitles. We were going to do the story that effectively ended up being the Punisher versus the Avengers mini. And then we were going to do War Journal. And the idea with War Journal, because that Punisher, the mini, ended up with the Avengers basically going, we cannot put you in prison. Mm-hmm. Because that is literally locking the fox into the hen house. So we've got to put you in solitary, and we've got to put you in a solitary that is going to be humane and appropriate and that you can't get out of. And then the idea was going to be that for War Journal, because I wanted to maintain Frank's silence, right? So in the Punisher run, he really doesn't talk, and you don't get any of this internal narration. He's not a guy who's got a lot to say.
Right.
And the same thing in the Avengers one. That was basically like, no, we're just going to send separate Avengers after him so you see him through their eyes. The idea in War Journal would be that Fury would come and basically spring him. But it wouldn't be, I am breaking you out. It would be like you are being released into S.H.I.E.L.D.'s custody. Okay. And you are now going to head up a special ops team for me. And so War Journal would have been Frank leading a team of like 4 special operations S.H.I.E.L.D. agents on some serious black ops in the Marvel Universe. Mm-hmm. and it would have been war journal because the narration, the conceit there would have been you would have had the members of the team writing the journal, right? So this is the after action of the operation. This is what happened. This is what it's like. And so you would again be seeing Frank through their eyes. Mm-hmm. And my understanding is that Axel hated my run. Didn't like what I was doing with Punisher. So, we had planned all this and it had been approved and then just got yanked. I see. Became all right, well, you got to end it.
And you did like journal and then zone, I guess, war zone.
Yeah, I think it was the Punisher and then it was war zone and then it was supposed to be war journal.
Okay.
And we never did war journal.
Okay.
But war journal could have been pretty cool because that would have worked for about 25 issues, at which point Frank would have been like, I'm done.
Yeah, and you get that arc.
Yeah, I mean, he just one day wouldn't come back from an operation, and Nick would have known that was going to happen and would have been happy that he had gotten, that much of a run out of him.
Okay, fair enough. So we did really good. We're right at the hour mark today.
And that's good because I got to get this. I am expecting a delivery for this electronic press kit stuff that I am doing tomorrow.
So we could see more of Greg and hear more of Greg, all about the old guard on Netflix coming out in July. So we are excited though.
Yeah. Oh, it is. Come on, man. The trailer looks so much fun.
Looks so good. So good. So congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
Have a fantastic week about it. And
you as well.
Say hi to Jen and Dashel and Elliot and Marlo and we'll talk next week.
Yeah, and hopefully next week doesn't have to be like exactly an hour window. I'll have more time. And
don't worry. I will take what I can get. I'll take what I can get, and our listeners are all really enjoying it. So thank you again for your time, and until next week, everyone. It's the Greg Rucka Masterclass.
Oh, be nice to each other, you guys.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to Culture Chat and hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please subscribe and rate my podcast. Feel free to leave me suggestions or send an email to mimi@culturechatpodcast.com or follow me on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook.